What's up, everyone? It's been a while. I hope you've all been doing well. I took a little bit of time off. I took a 2-week vacation, went and visited family. But I'm back now, and today we're going to be going over the Season 4 Reloaded patch notes. I'm not going to waste much time, but as always, if you guys like the content, be sure to drop a like on the video, and then if you want to see more of my Call of Duty content, just be sure to subscribe and hit the little bell icon so you get notified. But let's just jump directly into this. I'm doing the patch notes a little bit differently this time. Last time, and in the past, I've just basically read through the patch notes and talked about how I feel about stuff. But this time, on TrueTechData, the website, I actually left all of the pre-patch guns on there. So if, say for example, like the Kilo 141 got a big buff in this patch. So what I did is I have a pre-buff version of the Kilo on TGD. You won't be able to put attachments on it. But a lot of the time you don't need attachments really to get a feel for how the damage is going to be changed in terms of like time to kill and stuff like that. So there is a pre-patch. So if we go look at this right now, AR, let's scroll down to the Kilo. You can see Kilo has Kilo 141 and then Kilo 141 pre-buff. So if you add both of these, the pre-buff is obviously the pre-patch value, and then the Kilo 141 is the current value. So for any attachment or any gun that has had damage values changed in this patch, I left the pre-patch version on there, and we'll be comparing those as we go through this just to see how things change. But let's jump into it, and we will talk about all of the Season 4 Reloaded patch changes. So this is the patch notes page that I've covered in the past. It's cleanravensoftware.com. Basically, you just take the Raven software patch notes and you put clean in front of it. And I'll link these down below. And I believe at the top of the page, it says that this is created by KevBond3 on Twitter, so I don't know who he is, but huge thank you to him for making these auto-generated clean patch notes so it's easier. It updates all the gun names, so if it's like Assault Rifle Alpha, it'll actually pull the correct gun name, as well as color coding all the changes. And there's a couple mistakes in here usually. I think it's done through just like some programmatic stuff, so there's every now and then a small mistake, but in general this is so much better than just the default patch notes that we get from Raven. But anyway, the first up, we're going to talk about the bar. So the bar basically just had a slight recoil increase. We'll talk about a little bit how this stuff's going to affect the meta as we go, but it's going to be hard until I actually can get in and try these things out. But really, just has more recoil now, it looks like. That's pretty much the only change, which is good because it had virtually no recoil. It had a lot of visual, but the actual recoil was very minimal before. So I think that's a good change. The STG 44, again, this is the same as the bar, caught a slight nerf to its recoil, so it only helps 30% now instead of 40% for the main long range barrel. Cooper carbine, same thing again. It's going to have more horizontal bounce, horizontal recoil. So this is a dramatic nerf from 30% down to 11% is how much the 9mm rounds, which was like the meta choice for the Cooper, helps the horizontal recoil. So that's a big nerf there. The ITRA burst. The only change here was the 303 British magazine now is only minus 10% bullet velocity instead of minus 20%. So that's a slight buff there. I actually need to look into the ITRA because they've been buffing it every single patch pretty much, trying to sneak it into the meta, I think. But I think it's really difficult for them to balance burst weapons. I think a lot of the time a burst weapon is just either bad or it's like way OP. So I think they're trying to just slowly buff it over and over. So I need to look into that in more detail and see if that can sneak into the meta now. NZ41. So obviously the NZ's been the meta for a long time now, a little over 2 months. It's just been kind of oppressive, and they've nerfed it a little bit, but now it's finally been put in the grave. So the min damage, so this is the last damage range, which is the most important damage range on Caldera. Dramatic nerf. So 4 damage before any multipliers. That's a huge nerf. And I do think this will kick the NZ well out of the meta. They've also reduced the neck damage and reduced the damage range a little bit and gave it worse recoil. So finally, the NZ is no longer going to be the meta choice. For the Nikita, they actually gave it another buff. So again, this is one of those guns kind of like the ITRA where it's been getting buffed over and over and over. And this time it got a little bit of a movement speed buff, a little bit of an ADS movement speed buff. And then the barrels were changed up slightly. They really want this to be a good sniper support weapon, and it's finally getting to the point where I think it could be competitive, but me personally, I just like to use SMGs, so that's why I haven't used the Nikita too much, but it is going to be a pretty decent choice, I think. So the KG M40, this was, if nothing else changed, I thought the KG would probably be the meta choice after the NZ got nerfed, just because it's one of those guns that has 0 recoil. But you can see they did nerf it as well with the NZ a little bit, so the max damage range was reduced by about 10%, and then the last damage was reduced by 1 before the multipliers, so that could be up to probably 3 damage on like a headshot. Again, we can go compare these on TGD here in a second. I'm just going to get through all the assault rifles first, and then we'll look at them individually. The Restore Shrouded Barrel had a recoil nerf, so that's good. And then the 30-06, this is basically the high caliber mag for the KG, had its recoil penalty decreased a little bit, so it's a little bit better actually in terms of recoil now. But it wasn't really the meta choice before anyway. You pretty much used the default magazine before. And then surprisingly, they've started to buff some of the older guns. So we got the Amax, has a buff to the headshot multiplier, and then also a huge buff to the final damage range, so from 24 up to 28. Again, we'll go look at this in a second. I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference for the Amax. I don't think it's going to be back in the meta, but at least it is getting some love, because it was basically unusable before. And it might be okay on like Rebirth, the smaller maps. It's just on Caldera, the Vanguard guns with the 3 to 6x optic, it's going to be really hard to get away from that, because there's so many long range engagements on Caldera that the 3 to 6x is perfect, because the 3x is just below that affected FOV threshold and the 6x is just above. So you effectively have like the VLK optic from the Modern Warfare guns and a sniper scope in one. So if you have a gun with low recoil, in general, you're going to leave it on 3x, and then if somebody's really far and you need to use that extra zoom or mount up and use that extra zoom, it's going to be really hard to get away from that, I think, because the other guns don't have that. Even the Modern Warfare, Black Ops Cold War both don't have an optic like that. But the Kilo 141 got a big buff as well. So these are both actually the same buff. They've just worded it differently in 2 different steps. So the Kilo originally had 3 different damage values, so 2 different damage drop-offs, and that was added because the Kilo was such a low recoil gun back in Verdansk that in order to make it kind of fit in a little bit better, they had to add that 3rd damage value. And now they've removed that again. So now it's back to being like the other assault rifles, where it only has 2 damage values, 1 damage drop off. And again, this is saying the same thing. So the mid damage was 23 before. So now that mid damage has been removed. So the minimum damage the gun can do went from 18 at the longer range to 23 now, because that last drop off was removed. So these mean the same thing. It's not 2 buffs, it's just a single buff. The Farah 83, slight damage range buff, like 10%. The Krig, so the Krig is the only other assault rifle that I'm aware of that has that 3rd damage drop off, and it was done for the same reason as the Kilo. They did not remove that for the Krig like they did for the Kilo in this patch, but they did buff the mid damage range and did up the headshot damage a little bit. And then a fan favorite, the M13, actually caught a neck damage multiplier increase. So from 1.01 up to 1.3, we'll go look at what this actually does in a second. But nice little buff for the M13. Again, I think it's going to be a good choice, especially on the small maps. But I think there's some guns that we'll talk about probably in later videos that are still going to be better than all of these Modern Warfare, Black Ops Cold War options. But it is nice to see them actually giving those guns some love. The Volk got a nice headshot damage buff, and then also they did the same thing with the 7.62 Gorenko mags here that they did with the STG and the NZ, where they reduced or they removed that damage penalty. So there's no more damage penalty for using the small caliber mags that help with recoil. They also buffed the fire rate somewhat, so they're kind of trying to give the Volk the same treatment they gave the STG and the NZ that made both those guns meta. Unfortunately, it still is only a 45 round mag, up from 40. So it's going to be hard to use probably on Caldera, just because that's going to be a pretty small mag for longer range engagements. But it's going to have pretty good time to kill, and it's going to have really low recoil. So that'll be an interesting thing to check out. All right, so like I said, I've added the pre-nerf or pre-buff values for all these different patch changes. So anytime there's a damage change, we can come look at that on TGD. So we're going to start with the NZ41, the ultimate meta from the past 2 months. Orange is the current post-patch NZ41, and then the magenta is the pre-patch, so what was the meta before. You can see that the damage range has been changed slightly, and then also you essentially get 1 or 2 more shots to kill on 300 health combination shots, so that's a big deal. This is bringing the TTK over 1 second for that longer range engagement, which is a really big nerf. it was just an oppressive gun before because it had such low TTK combined with low recoil, and now the TTK is going to be much worse, which is going to be kind of where it should be and should have been to start with. So this is a great change, and I think it is going to push the NZ out of the meta. So like I covered before, the KGM40 also caught a little bit of a nerf, so we got a slight damage range nerf, 1 damage point nerf to the last damage range, and then also a decrease in headshot damage. So what this does, if we look at the TTK chart, combination shots, you're going to see the current KGM40 after the patch today is orange, and then the magenta is the pre-nerf, pre-change KGM40. So in the first damage range on combination shots, basically it now has an extra shot to kill, and that is because of the headshot multiplier change, because that's the only thing that changed in the first damage range. And then the second damage range, that 1 point lower damage actually didn't affect the combination TTK, but again, these are like arbitrary numbers that I've picked. So in certain cases, it will affect the time to kill, but these are just like an average that I think, you know, represent what a general fight's gonna have in a lot of cases. But it's impossible to encapsulate every single situation that a gun could be in on this chart. So this is just basically the best I can do. So in some cases, yes, it will have worse time to kill out at range, probably with that 1 damage nerf. But with these shot percentages in the first range is where it's really affected by that headshot multiplier change. All right, so for the Amax caught a very big damage buff in the last range and a headshot multiplier increase, so it does more headshot damage now. So I've got the pre-patch in magenta for the Amax, and then the current Amax in orange. I've put the STG 44, current STG 44 with the Gorenko 50 round mag. We know how little recoil this has. It's on here as well, just so we had something to compare to. So that's the cyan line, and you can see that dramatic change to the TTK out at range between the old Amax and the new Amax. Now it has a very good time to kill compared to something like the STG with that 50 round Gorenko. But again, recoil is king at range, and the Amax on Caldera, even though it has good time to kill now, it's not gonna sneak back into the meta, I don't think, not with this change. Because we can only use that VLK, so we only have basically the close optic, whereas the STG has the 3 to 6x, so it's going to have basically a VLK and a sniper scope in one. Dramatically less recoil than the Amax, dramatically easier to hit your shots. So yeah, it's cool to see the Amax buffed, and it might be a good choice for the small maps. But for Caldera, I think there's going to be other guns. I'm not saying the STG is the meta, I'm just saying this is something we know what it feels like, and it's something good to compare to. And I think overall there will be definitely better guns still for Caldera, but still really cool that they're finally buffing some of these older guns and getting them at least somewhat back in the mix. All right, next up we're going to look at the Kilo. Again, we're going to compare to the STG. So looking at this comparison, we have current Kilo in orange, pre-patch Kilo in magenta, and you can see that it has that third damage range where the TTK gets just really bad. But now with the updated Kilo, it no longer has that last damage range. And it has the original damage profile. So compared to the STG, it's going to have better time to kill up close, and then basically the same as the 50 round Gorenko TTK out at range. So this would be something that I think would be closer to the meta than the Amax, just because the recoil is easier on the Kilo. But again, I still think that there's going to be better guns from Vanguard. A big part of that's the optic, but in general, I think the STG probably has a little bit more actual recoil than the Kilo. But the old Modern Warfare guns and Black Ops Cold War guns had much more like visual shake and things like that made it harder to hit your shots at range than a lot of these Vanguard guns. So I'm not sure. I'll have to try these things, but the Kilo probably is going to be pretty close to meta, but I don't think it's going to actually be the meta for Caldera. Again, it's probably going to be fantastic for the small maps. The Kilo is going to be a really good choice for the small maps because it has that good time to kill up close, and it's going to be really easy to control at all the ranges that you have on the small maps. But Caldera, some of the engagements are very long, and you're going to want that 3 to 6x optic and some of the lower visual recoil. So I've got the M13 on here now. Same as all the other comparisons. Orange is the current M13, and then magenta is the pre-patch M13. And you can see that they sit on top of each other here on combination 300 health. The only thing that changed with the M13 is the next shot damage. And this does have a very competitive time to kill now. It's faster time to kill than the STG with the 50 round Gorenko mag. And that is going to be great because the M13 already was very low recoil. I think it'll be a competitive option. Whether or not it's the absolute meta, I doubt. I do think there's going to be some other options, as I've said, for the other 3 or 4 Modern Warfare guns I've covered. I do think it's going to be a very good option, especially for the small maps, though. I think this M13 is going to be very close to the meta for the small maps. But I want to talk about a little bit what this next shot multiplier change actually does to the gun. So let's go look at the STK calculator on TGD. Try to zoom this in a little bit for you guys. So in the first damage range, this is the old, this is the pre-buff M13. You can see next shot damage used to be exactly the same as chest shot. So obviously it never helped your time to kill. In the first damage range, the M13 with 1 headshot does exactly 300 damage with 11 chest shots, and you get that 12 shot TTK. And then in the second damage range, it took 2 headshots to do exactly 300 damage. And that's why the M13 has good time to kill, is because it has these quantized health values, 20 and 30. That means that you have perfect TTK efficiency. There's no wasted damage when you're shooting someone at 300 health. But let's compare this to the new M13. So with the new next shot multiplier here, now in the first damage range, you can get that reduced time to kill if you hit 2 next shots and 10 chest shots. So it used to be just 1 headshot. Now, if you hit 1 headshot or 1 next shot, you're going to get that really nice 741 millisecond time to kill. But out in the second damage range, it doesn't really have that big of an effect. So if you think about this, the 2 headshots required to get this 300 health or 300 damage to get that lower time to kill, that is exactly 300 health. So these headshots, even though we have a next shot multiplier, those cannot be replaced with a next shot because you'll do less than 300 damage. So it still requires 2 full headshots, not like 1 headshot, 1 next shot. That's not something that would result in a 300 health down. And then for next shots, you'd have to get 4 full next shots to get that 14 shot to kill and that good time to kill. So it does help a little bit because this is going to happen sometimes, but it's going to be pretty rare that the next shot's really going to affect how the gun performs at range in this case. All right, on to the SMGs. So the Arma caught a slight nerf, and that is only to the body 570 millimeter barrel. So it has like 1 headshot damage less than it had before, maybe 2. Just a slight nerf to the headshot multiplier. The Blixen caught a small nerf as well. Reduced headshot damage, reduced the minimum damage, so the damage at range by 1. A slight 1% change to the movement speed, slight nerf. The Johnson barrel's been nerfed a couple times now, so I don't think it's going to be the one to choose ever anymore. It was really interesting when the gun first came out, and now it's definitely one of the worst choices. The 7.62 Gorenko 54 round mag, this was probably the most popular magazine. That got a nerf from 1.18 multiplier to the head to 1.1, so this is probably a few damage different on the headshot. The Blixen's still going to be a meta SMG for sure, because if you look at this is only the min damage, so that's only at range. And then a slight change to the headshot damage probably isn't going to matter that much. We'll look at it in detail in a second. But yeah, the Blixen's still going to be definitely a meta SMG. Arma is going to be a meta SMG as well. Onto the Marco. The Marco max damage was decreased. So the first damage range was decreased by 2 before the multipliers. So that can be more than that or less than that, depending on the shot location. The mid damage was reduced as well. They didn't change the last damage range, but the next neck damage was nerfed across the board from 1.5 down to 1.25 multiplier. And then the Perfetto Lesto barrel, which was pretty much the meta barrel that everybody was using, had its positive damage multipliers removed. So this is a pretty big nerf to the Marco. I do think it's going to be worse than the Blixen now, and probably worse than the Arma as well. I think these are going to be the 2 SMGs you really want to look at for this season. So the UGR, this was the new Black Ops Cold War SMG that was introduced, I don't know, probably like 2 or 3 months ago at this point, maybe more than that. Time just vanishing right now from my life. But anyway, the UGR was not very good. It kind of felt pretty good when I used it, but in actuality, it just didn't compete with a lot of the other guns. So in this case, they've buffed that upper extremities value up to a multiplier of 1, up from 0.9. So that's pretty good. That's like upper arm and upper leg. And then the max damage in the first damage range was increased by 1, and the damage range was increased by about 10% as well. So it's a nice little buff. I still don't think it's going to be competitive with like the Blixen and the Arma, but at least it's getting some love. And then for some reason they buffed the Modern Warfare Uzi. Again, they're just trying to sneak some of these older guns back in, and I think that's pretty cool. So the Uzi's min damage was increased up to 28, so at range, and then the next shot multiplier went from 1.01 all the way up to 1.42. So that's a huge buff to the next shot multiplier for the Uzi. And then the Cold War MP5 got a nice little buff as well, from 7.6 meters up to 10 meters for the first damage range. That's a nice damage range increase. And then also got increased next shot damage. So pretty much across the board, shotguns got a really big buff in this patch. So Black Ops Cold War shotguns, Vanguard shotguns, Modern Warfare shotguns, all just got a really big buff. So those are going to be probably really, really good on the small maps now. A little harder to use on Caldera, but still probably a good choice based on how much damage these are going to do. So we'll see how this plays out. I'm hoping that people don't move to shotguns, because shotguns might be the most frustrating thing to come up against. But overall, yeah, big buffs across the board to shotguns. All right, so on to the sniper changes. So the ADS transition in time. So this is what ADS is recorded on TGD. Decreased to 405 from 430. So this should be green on this page. This is actually a buff to the car. So slightly faster ADS in the car. And then a couple small changes to the attachments for the car as well, but nothing big there. I still don't think the 6.5 Sakura is going to be the meta magazine. We'll see. But they did remove the damage penalty, so it does the same damage now. The 3 line, so the 3 line had some changes. It's not really a buff or a nerf, it's just kind of a change. So the max damage was 109, which is lower, so 6 damage less than it used to do, but they increased the multipliers. So it probably actually overall does a little bit more damage in general. And then they also reduced the idle sway on a bunch of the different optics. So the 10x, the 5x, and then medium telescopic sight. That's probably just the default optic on the gun that we can't see. So this is probably just the default sniper scope that's on the 3 line, if I had to guess. Gorenko anti-tank rifle is actually really good right now. I think got a really big buff. So the ADS time down from 600 to 520. So that is an 80 millisecond reduction in ADS time. This is going to be a highly competitive sniper rifle at this point. It already was, but I need to get the attachments up on TGD. I know that I'm missing some sniper attachments. So I'm going to work really hard to get that all added soon. But yeah, Gorenko is going to be a great option. Marksman rifle, just a couple small changes here. The M1 Garand, the lower extremities multiplier is a dramatic buff. So 20% increase in damage from 0.8% or 0.8 up to 1 for the multiplier. And then just a couple changes. So better bullet velocity on the shrouded barrel. No more damage penalty on the 12 round clip, but you're probably not going to use the 12 round clip. And then the 30-06 20 round drum. This is actually a nerf, so I don't know why it's green on here, but yeah, slower movement speed with the 20 round drum than you had before. Both the crossbows got an increase to bolt accuracy, so that's like ADS spread. So like the bolt before didn't go exactly where you were aiming. That's been improved now, so wherever your reticle is pointed, the shot on average is going to be 50% closer to that reticle with the R1 Shadowhunter, and 35% closer with the Modern Warfare crossbow. The Whitley, he just had a bunch of changes to its attachments. They completely reworked the rapid barrel. This used to be a 2x increase in fire rate and a dramatic reduction in damage, so we'll have to see how this plays out. Most likely still not going to be, I don't see a case where you're going to use this, but just interesting to see that they're reworking this stuff. It used to have a really good time to kill with the 303 British 45 round mag and reasonable recoil, so now the recoil is even better, but slightly worse TTK. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be higher recoil options than some of the other ones, but it'll have a very competitive time to kill with the British magazine. UGM 8, so this is the new LMG that was meta for like a day before they nerfed it. This is the burst barrel. You can see that they've brought the neck damage multiplier back. It used to be, I believe it used to be 1.6, and then they nerfed it down to 1.3, and now it's back to 1.6. And horizontal recoil control is now increased by 10%, so it's going to have even better recoil than before. I think the UGM 8 with the burst barrel is going to be the meta for Caldera, for me at least. But obviously I have to play this stuff and actually see how it feels. But I think that with the changes to the other low recoil guns, I think this is going to sneak back in to being a really, really good pick. We'll see. Obviously I'll make videos about that as we go. Tactical rifles, the Carve 2. So this is the burst gun from Black Ops Cold War that was never really meta, but kind of an interesting, faster firing, better TTK, but much harder to control M16. It has a better damage range now. The M16 caught a nice damage buff from 42 up to 40. I do want to look at this on the charts and see how this actually compares. Next damage location multiplier increased to 1.21, up from 1.1. So nice little buff to the M16. don't think it's going to be meta. I think the UGM8 with the burst barrel will be better than the M16 still, but the M16 will probably have better time to kill. So it'll be interesting comparing these different burst guns. They're really trying to sneak these burst guns into the meta, I think. Not really going to cover the pistol changes. Pistols are not on TGD right now. They're close to being re-added, but I just have 10,000 things going on all the time, so I haven't gotten back to increasing all this and getting it back on the site. As far as attachments go, just a few changes to attachments. The recoil booster now actually increases recoil by 1.5%. That's a very small amount, but like I've said in the past, even though it didn't increase the recoil, because it increased the fire rate, the effective rate of that recoil that you had to correct for was increased. But now it also actually increases the wall pattern spray, like how tall the actual recoil would be. Underbarrel, the Carver foregrip, this used to be like the vertical recoil king. That was reduced slightly from 9% down to 7%, so you have a little bit worse vertical recoil than you did before with the Carver foregrip. And then the Strife angled was nerfed a little bit as well, but in the other direction, so horizontal recoil. The Strife angled used to do 9%, and now it only does 7%. All right, so I said I wanted to look at the M16 changes. So this is the pre-buff M16. If you got one headshot before, you could reduce that time to kill and get the good time to kill down to 7 shots. And because it was a burst gun, it didn't have any drop-offs, so this was all ranges. And before, the neck damage didn't really help you. Like, there was almost no situation where the neck damage was ever going to reduce that time to kill. But now, if you look at the current M16, so this is the current M16, now one headshot reduces the time to kill and gets you that good number, and then one neck shot as well reduces that time to kill and gets you the good 7 shots to kill. So that's a really, really big buff for the M16. And I don't know, we could see it sneaking back in on the edge of the meta. It is going to have slower bullet velocity than the UGM, but it's going to have probably dramatically better time to kill in most situations. So it's going to be really interesting to check this out and see how this plays out in the actual game. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. Again, if you want to see more of my content, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to help support, like, comment on the video. We've launched the premium feature for aim sway. This is an animated aim sway that's adjusted based on your FOV setting and your in-game FOV, as well as distance to target. You can change all this stuff and do whatever you want here. This was really cool, a lot of work and a lot of fun work to do, honestly. So yeah, I just wanted to show you guys that. I've talked about it before, but it wasn't released until this video. This will be the first video that's out for, but yes. I don't know, hope you guys enjoyed the video, hope you learned something. All of this is up on TGD now, so you can go check it out yourself. And I really appreciate you guys all for watching the video and just helping support me in any way. It means so much to me. But yes, I'll see you guys all in the next video, which will probably be out tomorrow, talking more about the meta after I've actually used these weapons some.